These tiny threads of glass will change forever the way we live. The fibre-optic superhighway is coming to link the phone, TV and computer to maximise our choice.
We'll look back and see this is the biggest change that has ever occurred in our lifetimes.
Or are the sceptics right, that it's unnecessary, expensive and risks the further fragmentation of society?
We're being subjected to a great marketing effort by those corporations who would gain from the sale of the equipment.
The coming new world of superhighways. That's our story tonight.
Live from Sydney, the ABC's Lateline. Here's Kerry O'Brien.
Welcome to the program. When Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press 500 years ago, he meant it to print only religious texts. Instead, it spurred the Renaissance as scientific and philosophical ideas were liberated through books. Now we're being told we're on the cusp of another equally dramatic information revolution. And just as in the 15th century, no one is quite sure how it's going to turn out. The federal government has appointed an expert industry group to report by the end of the year on what the superhighway could mean for Australia. But while some are hailing the looming electronic revolution as the pen and paper of a new renaissance, others fear it will further fragment a society already overloaded with meaningless information. In a moment, we'll talk to two Americans on what the New World Information Order means. But first, Margot O'Neill has filed this hitchhiker's guide to the information superhighway.
All this could be coming to your lounge room soon. The ability to watch any TV program or film anytime. To book tickets, shop or bank. To call up newspapers or classrooms from around the world. Sure beats this week's TV guide, doesn't it? It's a technological revolution that could have as dramatic an impact on how we use television as the printing press had on the written word. Some have even compared its potential for a new age of information to the Renaissance.
2 years from now, 5 years from now and 10 years from now, we'll look back and see this is the biggest change that has ever occurred in our lifetimes.
If you believe the hype, then in just a few years, Australia's information services will seem as old-fashioned as an outback country road. Out here, there's not much traffic, only 2 lanes, just a few places to go. So it is with our current information system. You're either watching TV, talking on the telephone, or tapping away on your computer. Well, what if you bring all those technologies together? Welcome to the information superhighway. It's got an almost infinite number of lanes to carry information and entertainment programs that you not only watch, but interact with as well. This takes us beyond the couch potato. It's TV as information appliance.
This is going to be a two-way street. It won't just be information broadcast out to people. It'll be about individuals being able to be the source of information, the source of movies, the source of anything. The network will actually allow individuals to participate far better than they ever have before.
Your computerised TV set will be able to take you to school.
Any question?
So where did jazz come from?
Good question.
Or to a boutique. It can even browse programs and compile a digest tailored to your personal tastes, right down to the camera angle on your favourite sports match. We're just sort of overloading society with yet more technology.
It's in fact, I think, likely to be the very opposite. The only way back to the simple life is through technology. We want less buttons on our remote controls, less screens, less devices, fewer PIN numbers, but easy access to the things we really want.
It sounds so exciting that the backlash has inevitably started. There are widespread concerns that it's no more than a superhighway of hype spurred by corporations which want a fast return on investments.
I think we're being subjected to a great marketing effort by those corporations who would gain from the sale of the equipment. Bill Gates was here recently. It's certainly in his interest if we buy this, we'll be buying his software.
Microsoft boss Bill Gates, who popped in on Prime Minister Keating in Canberra recently, admits the superhighway needs evangelising.
You could say I'm an extreme zealot for pushing this vision forward. I see it as nothing less than a revolution in communications.
Consumers are still waiting to be converted, but many corporations have rushed to the altar. Because the new technology breaks down traditional boundaries between television, computers and telephones, cross-industry matings are now de rigueur. For instance, Telecom has joined up with Rupert Murdoch and Kerry Packer in a syndicate to provide pay TV, which will give Australia the first few lanes of the information highway. Not surprisingly, the developments are outpacing existing regulations. In fact, governments have barely begun to grapple with the issues raised by the new technology, like who would own the superhighway, what are the rules of the road for, say, copyright or censorship, and especially who'll get to use it. Some people may not be able to afford access because it won't be a freeway, but a toll road. The result may be a society stricken with a sort of informational apartheid.
What this will do is it will bring together the communities of interest of those who can take advantage of it. And that is those who are educated, skilled, and have high incomes. As we take advantage of that, many of the alternative services that are available to others become worse and even disappear.
Like what?
Basic telephone service could be affected. The role of libraries in society could be affected. Public education could be affected. It will magnify the difference between those who can take advantage of it and those who can't.
Consider Internet, an early forerunner of the info highway. It's a computer network that hooks up about 15 million people worldwide, many of whom get together on chat lines, sometimes also known as hot tubs.
People cruise chat lines. That they'll come in, have a look round, and if they find anyone interesting, they'll stay.
But unless your company or university is paying for it, watch out for the bill.
Typically, I think you do need to be rich insofar as for private access, you need your own computer. And that's an investment of $2,500 straight off. And you also need to be prepared to spend upwards of around $10 an hour cruising the internet.
But the biggest debate of all may be over what effect this will have on society. Will the superhighway mean there's even less reason to go out the front door? What happens to community discourse if the mass media loses its dominance and people are locked in virtual worlds via their computerised TVs?
It reduces the role of the mass. In the sense, we might say, one of the great virtues of the mass media is it provides a common agenda for the people to discuss what's going on in society. If you think that for the future there may be no mass media, that each of us can get our information from our own select sources and not communicate with others unless we want to, so that could lead to a fragmentation of society.
Like Gutenberg and his printing machine, just where the information superhighway may ultimately lead is anybody's guess.
That report from Margot O'Neill. And now to our guests in New York and Boston. Dr. Neil Postman is a critic, communications theorist, and chair of the Department of Culture and Communication at New York University and Professor of Media Ecology. He's lectured all over the world and has received numerous awards for teaching, including the George Orwell Award for Clarity in Language. He's the author of 18 books, the most recent being Technopoly, The Surrender of Culture to Technology. Mitchell Kapor is the co-founder and chair of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a public interest organisation based in Washington, D.C., concerned with understanding the social impact of digital communications media. He's also the designer of Lotus 123, one of the world's most widely used application software programs. Mitchell Kapor has testified before Congress many times concerning telecommunications policy and currently serves on the US National Information Infrastructure Advisory Council. I recorded this discussion late last week. Mitch Kapor, I'd like to cut through the hype on this issue and separate the virtual reality from the reality. What positive potential does this technology offer society? Will it fundamentally alter our lives to the good?
Well, there are no guarantees, but there are some interesting possibilities, for instance, in the renewal of intelligent written discourse between people. If you look at what people are doing today on computer bulletin boards and on the internet, they're expressing themselves in a way that's really a renaissance of writing, and there's much more thoughtful and intelligent exchange going on there than you might suspect. So we could be helping revitalize democracy.
And what potential negatives do you acknowledge?
Well, I mean, there are an enormous range of potential negatives. I mean, if the information superhighway winds up as a kind of a 500-channel version of what we have today with television, and we turn into a whole world of virtual reality couch potatoes, and that's all that these billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in the information superhighway produce, you know, interactive shopping and I Love Lucy reruns, it will be an enormous waste and a tragedy.
Neil Postman, are you looking forward in any way with eagerness to this next renaissance?
We now can get, even with the current technologies, abundant information to people very fast and in diverse forms. So in my view, this new technology, far from being so revolutionary as to be compared to Gutenberg's invention, is in a sense irrelevant and diverts our attention from real issues that we have to face. For instance, just to give this point, if a nuclear holocaust occurs, it will not be because people had insufficient information. And if children are starving in Somalia, it's not because people have insufficient information. And if crime is terrorizing the streets of our city, it has nothing to do with people having insufficient information. And yet time and time again, when the zealots talk about all of this, they talk as if the problem we need to solve is how to get more information to people faster and in more diverse forms. I think there's something else missing from us that causes the most serious problems we have and has nothing whatever to do with technology. But the preoccupation with technology diverts our attention from facing what those problems are.
Let me just respond to that,
yes,
if I could, for a minute, because I think it is an excellent point there. I mean, a lot of people already suffer from data shock, of having too much information and too little meaning. And it's a very naive view of the information superhighway that the point of it is to give people more information if we're already drowning in it. But what I think should not be ignored is the change that will occur if we go from a world dominated by mass media, in which there are really a very small number of privileged sources of information, broadcast television networks and major newspapers, and we go to a world in which many people have an opportunity to have an equal voice. Obviously, you can't compel anybody to listen to you, but in an open and democratic system of networks, I think the leveling effect of cutting down to some extent the advantage the privileged voices could have a very salutary effect in moving the conversation in a direction that gets us out of a lot of the cliches and ruts that we're in today.
I worry more about what would happen to the idea of a public, because after all, a public is different from a mass of people. In fact, I'm not even sure I agree with Mitch when he talks about the mass media creating a public, because television, for example, has the capacity to set agendas. In a way, television, I think, undermines the idea of a public in that it makes public discourse rather remote from most people, so that they do not have as many opportunities as they once had actually to share ideas and opinions with each other. And of course, that's another thing I always worry about with the technology, especially something like virtual reality, that more and more our advanced technology seems to move us away from a co-present, face-to-face, intimate conversation and relationships with people.
Well, in fact,
I mean, here in America, AT&T runs commercials saying, reach out and touch someone. And they mean by that, call them on the telephone. Now, this is already a way to redefine the concept of intimacy. And I think more and more we're going to find that what is called human communication will be more remote, more distanced from each other, and have some very serious psychic effects.
Mitch Capel, picking up on that point and going further at the same time as you address what Neil has raised, who what about the question, in the short term at least, of an even wider generational gap developing between parents and children? In terms of a children's grasp of this technology, and many parents being somewhat lazy about it and not really being across it. Who controls children's access to pornography, potentially, to violence and so on? If most parents' grasp of communications technology doesn't go beyond the play and rewind buttons of their video machines, how are they going to grapple with this?
Well, first of all, we have to look at the current baseline. If the average child growing up in the U.S. sees over 100,000 murders on primetime television while they grow up, how much worse could any new thing be? I mean, we have to take seriously the notion that things are out of control right now. And one reason that they're out of control is we have television, a medium which is absolutely dominated by the development of least common denominator programming that can attract the broadest possible audiences. I have to believe that any medium which created a greater diversity of voices and sources of information and offered people more choice would actually, on balance, be better than the kind of mind-numbingly hypnotic programming that passes for most of the primetime schedule.
I think that television itself, as we have it now, pretty much signals the end of the concept of childhood, because childhood depends entirely on the possibility of a culture keeping secrets from the young. Social secrets, sexual secrets, political secrets, and so on.
That's pretty much gone already, hasn't it? That is virtually gone now.
Exactly. And what we normally mean by socialization is that we reveal the secrets to the young in psychologically assimilatable stages. And then when the young know all the secrets, of course, they're adults. But in the world of television, the entire content of the adult world is revealed at once to everybody, so that it becomes impossible, really, to sustain any adult secrets or keep adult secrets and sustain the idea of a special phase of life that acts as a bridge between infancy and adulthood. And Mitch, if I understood him, thinks that maybe the new technologies would work against that tendency, but I think not. I think it would only intensify it and make the idea of childhood more and more untenable.
Okay, we've got not much time left, and this is obviously a topic we could run for a week and just scratch the surface. But I'd like to move on to the implications of how all this is controlled, and neither of you obviously argues the implications, at least, and the potential impacts. I mean, who owns this technology? How does government control it? What restrictions do you place on business ownership? Why won't the technology in the end up being dominated by 4 or 5 giant world conglomerates run by the Time Warners, the Murdochs, and so on?
Well, here's the issue. There's really a risk here of exactly that. There are a couple of incredibly important principles that I think have to be part of a government's fundamental policies in this regard. The first being a principle of universal service, which means that every citizen has the ability to purchase an affordable connection to the system, and the second being a principle of open access, which is, or non-discriminatory access, which is to say that any information or content or service provider has a right to connect to the network to supply information to those people who want it. We absolutely have to have a legal regime which makes that possible, because if we don't, we will wind up with exactly the kind of highly centralized dominance by a small cadre of very powerful private entities that we just can't afford.
But you've already got that now. That has already happened in world communications now.
Not exactly. If you look in the U.S., for instance, and you contrast the phone system to the cable television system, the cable television operator today is a gatekeeper who decides what goes on and what does not go on the system, whereas the telephone system operates under a principle of common carriage, which is the phone companies are not allowed to interfere with the content of what people say. It's that latter capability that we need to preserve and extend, in fact, in this new domain.
But there's also the question of the superhighways outstripping governments' capacity. This is the government's capacity to protect their own national sovereignty too, and culture, and countries to protect their own culture from cultural imperialism, if you like. I think at the moment India is one developing country expressing concern about the impact of and intrusion of satellite television coming in from outside.
Look, you can't keep the wind from crossing your border, and you won't be able to keep the bits from crossing the border either. That's just reality. People have to adjust to that and figure out what to do about it. Efforts to try to stop that from happening are just not going to work.
I do think, though, just to say quickly, that there are issues of social policy and possibilities of political action that might help modify the scenario that, at least the pessimistic scenario that Mitch drew. But I should like to say also that I think education here has to be mentioned. I think one of the obvious implications of everything we've been talking about is that technology education now has to be a central part of the schooling of our young. And by technology education, I don't mean how to operate a television camera or even how to program a computer, although that may be part of it. What I'm talking about is our young studying in a very serious way the history and social consequences of technology, the economic basis of technology, the political and even moral implications of new technologies. And I think if this were a central subject that was part of the schooling of all young people, it is not too much to hope that we would, in the end, if democracy is still working, be able to find an amicable and constructive resolution to some of the problems that technology will bring.
There's also surely the potential to abuse privacy on a far more massive scale even than currently. The capacity of the national security organisations, the myriad forms of hacking, the new kinds of computer and superhighway crime.
Yes, I think there are many issues concerning what we even mean by privacy. One of the interesting points about new technology is that it almost always changes the definition of old words. So that here in America we talk about a debate between Bush and Clinton, as if what is happening between them had anything to do with what happened between Lincoln and Douglas back in the mid-19th century. We use the word debate, as if we're talking about the same thing. But television has changed the meaning of debate. The computer apparently is in the process of changing the meaning of the word privacy. This is something we have to examine very carefully.
Okay, Mitch Kapor, you've got no doubt, though, that all of this will happen as it's being predicted, that that we will embrace the technology and that the technology will deliver all of these things that, the Bill Gates are saying it will?
What I'm pretty certain of is that this technology is going to roll in just as the automobile did in the early part and middle part of the century to become a very central institution, and it will transform lots of things from education to entertainment to social life.
That's a very important point because Mitch mentioned the automobile. If we knew in 1905 what we know now about the automobile, it might have been possible for us to maximize the advantages of the automobile and minimize some of its disadvantages. We could have done this in 1915, maybe 1925 and 35, maybe even in 1955. Now I think it's too late. Now our lives are much more controlled by the automobile than we control the automobile. And this is what I think we would have to begin to do now with these new technologies.
Yeah, okay, now that just let me, we've only got a minute left, but that is a huge point in all of this, isn't it? I mean, very brief answers from both of you. Do you really believe that society up to this point has demonstrated that it has the foresight or even the aftersight and the willingness, once we do see problems developing, to tackle them? Because base politics very often gets in the road, doesn't it? Do we have the capacity, really, in the end, to control this?
Very briefly, you know, is the glass half empty or half full? I mean, there are ample things to be highly critical of, but at the same time, I think that there are some remarkable accomplishments that Western societies have made in raising the standard of living, in health, in freedom, and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
But at the same time, there are many people who are saying that we are destroying the planet at the same time as we're enjoying these advantages that they will ultimately be transitory.
You'll have to have us back on an ecology and environment program then.
Okay. Neil Postman, very briefly.
Well, I think we have the capacity to exert a measure of control over our technology so that we use it more than it uses us. Whether or not we have the kind of discourse and education and structures which allow people to understand these issues is another matter, but I think we have the capacity, especially now when people are becoming more conscious of technology's effects. We have the capacity to do this. Whether we have the will is another matter.
Neil Postman, Mitch Capor, thanks very much for talking with us. And now let's take a look at tomorrow's headlines in the newspapers back here in Australia. The Melbourne Age reports that the federal opposition leader is fighting renewed attacks to defend his bid to broaden support for the Liberal Party. The Australian also runs with the widening rift between Liberal leadership contender John Howard and John Hewson. The Melbourne Herald Sun reports on the sell-off of the city's Southgate Arts and Leisure Complex for less than half its development cost. The Financial Review runs with the Reserve Bank moving to tighten prudential controls over domestic banks to cover their exposure in the derivatives market. The Sydney Telegraph Mirror leads on the increasing cost of maintaining the New South Wales upper house. And the West Australian reports that parents in the state have been given the right to decide school closures. That's all from us tonight. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with a reminder also that Lateline is repeated each day at 12:30 after the World at noon. Until then, good night.